All right, looks like we're live. Okay, so welcome to the fourth live stream for my Warrior Woman 91 lovely YouTube page. It's very exciting to be here. We have here Aaron and Harry from the Daily Wire, and I apologize, and Amanda apologizes to everybody who really wanted to see Amanda. She was not able to be here today, so we will press on without her. Thank you both for coming and sticking with me. All right, so today we are going to be discussing the divide in the Republican Party, which has since gone from 2 parts to now 3. We are going to talk about what my dad likes to call the Venn diagram, which you guys probably read Ben's article about the divide in the Republican Party with that wonderful little Venn diagram. Let's see what I got. Here it is. I'm going to do a screen share here.
Oh, cool.
So
yeah,
here is the Venn diagram. Okay, we're having a little bit of trouble with the connection. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Because I can't hear anybody anymore. Okay. All right. So let's start with Harry. Harry is going to talk about the establishment part of this Venn diagram and who is the Republican.
Okay. So I think the establishment is kind of it's sort of a distorted term nowadays. It's like, especially with, I think once Donald Trump started getting big, according to his voters, it's sort of being like you're either a Donald Trump supporter or you're part of the establishment. And I think because of that, it sort of lost a lot of meaning in what it actually represents. And so I think the establishment is something that kind of naturally would arise in any government. And there's there's a Republican establishment, and then there's a Democrat establishment. And then where the issue they sort of differ, I think those are sort of dependent on their base. So, for example, the Republican establishment, their base would be like the Tea Party, the Conservatives, and the things that their base would kind of be strong with are, let's say, pro-life, for example. And then, so the Republican establishment is largely pro-life. Like if you take Jeb Bush or even Marco Rubio, their positions on abortion are all fairly consistent. And then if you contrast that to the Democrat establishment, people like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, their positions on the same issue, you could say they're all establishment politicians, but for example, on that issue, their position is more with their base, which is more pro-choice, a lot more kind of radical, like they're all fully support partial birth abortion, etc. So small issues like that, they do differ, but they also have a lot of overlap, the Democrat and the GOP establishment. And sort of I think the way it kind of comes, into fruition, the whole establishment wing is the governments usually kind of like to consolidate power, right? So obviously originally when the Constitution was written, it wasn't meant that there would be some kind of establishment. It was the purpose of the Constitution was to try and sort of minimize the existence of an establishment. It was to separate the government from the private sector of the economy, from the rest of the country. But then, I guess, sort of through the decades, especially, I think when sort of businesses and corporations become really large, they tend to like the government, right? Because the government gives them, more power. I guess it makes it easier to stay as a big corporation. An example, let's say, Apple Computers, for example. So they have about $200 billion in cash. And for a company like Apple, regulations they don't necessarily affect Apple the way they would affect, let's say, me if I were to start a computer company. So if Apple is able to kind of lobby Congress and get a law passed that creates, let's say, a new government body called the Federal Computer Regulation Agency. And if anybody in Washington is listening to this, is probably going to happen tomorrow, maybe. So they create a new government body, and this government body is responsible for approving new computer designs, let's say. So if I want to bring a new computer to the market, I have to talk to this regulatory body, and they have to do some tests on it and then approve it before it goes to the market. And just as an example, let's say it costs $1 million to pass all these tests. And this is sort of an analogy of the FDA, but did Kelly just leave?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, she's back. Okay, so yeah, I think her connection's a bit weak. So right. Okay, so let me just continue. So sort of analogous to how the FDA works, this government agency would basically kind of regulate computers. And so yeah, it costs $1 million to pass the regulations. To a company like Apple, this is not a big deal, right? I mean, they have what, $200 billion in the bank. So to spend $1 million to get a new computer to market for them is basically meaningless. But for someone like me to enter the market, it's a huge barrier, right? So essentially what it means is Apple is able to drastically reduce their competition in the market and keep a sizable portion of the market share themselves. So this essentially is, I think, why a lot of companies like the government, a lot of bigger companies, they like government, they like regulation because it helps them avoid competition. So in that sense, I think if you kind of rack up decades and decades of kind of government and big business working together, you have this sort of class of politicians who have spent decades with businesses and big businessmen, and they ultimately have kind of shifted their positions in a sense that they can sort of ignore certain parts of what their base believes in a sense of how to divide the economy and the government, and sort of put that aside for, I guess, their kind of interest businesses that are kind of giving them money as campaign donations or whatever. And then just as examples, you have people like Jeb Bush, for example. So he has a foundation for education, right? I think the Foundation for Educational Excellence or something. And through Common Core, which as a conservative you would not be a fan of the Department of Education in general, right? Because it doesn't say in the Constitution that the federal government should be in charge of education. But nonetheless, the self-avowed conservative Jeb Bush, he has made a lot of money through Common Core and through the Department of Education, again because of that foundation. So that's just one example of how a sort of conservative politician is also at the same time taking non-conservative positions because of special interests. Right, and then as Aaron, he's mentioned before, I guess Marco Rubio, his campaign has gotten a lot of money from open borders groups, which again, another example of, and otherwise I think Marco Rubio is a conservative, but because of other special interests and other kind of external pressures, I guess he's taking positions that are non-conservative. And it's kind of hard to comment on whether or not he believes those things or whether Jeb Bush actually likes Common Core, because you can't read their minds, but you can only kind of speak on what they've done. And both those candidates have supported and pushed non-conservative positions.
Yeah.
And then I think another point is when you talk about the establishment, there's sort of two sides to the establishment. You can have establishment politicians who are kind of they're not business affiliated themselves, people like, let's say, John McCain or Lindsey Graham. And then on the other hand, you have the donor class. These are people who are giving them money, right? You have people like Donald Trump, for example. So Donald Trump has never been a politician, which is true, but that does not mean he's not an establishment figure, right? As it's been written many times, he basically funded people who were on the. It was Chuck Schumer, it was Lindsey Graham, John McCain. So I guess now that he's running, he's an outsider. Yeah, well, Hillary Clinton, of course. He calls himself an outsider, but I mean, the fact is, if the things that have been allowed to happen because of his donations have done the opposite of make America great again, right? Ironically. So I think so. I mean, that's in essence, I think, what the establishment is. It's politicians who are, I guess, conservative as far as the GOP establishment goes, but then on a lot of issues they take completely non-conservative positions because of external kind of pressures through special interest groups and donors. And I guess so. This is something that Bernie Sanders supporters love because they're all about let's pass these laws to change campaign finance, which I don't personally agree with them. I don't think the solution to something like this is to pass restrictive laws that say companies can't come together and spend money on advertising or on movies, books, whatever. Ultimately, I think the only way to really kind of cut down on this kind of thing is to just legitimately shrink the effect that government can have on the private sector, right? I mean, there's no because you can't eliminate money from politics unless you pass like really kind of draconian laws that say that regulate basically how every penny is spent. I think the only actual solution is to take power away from the government.
I like that. Excellent job.
Yeah, that's my establishment rant.
Very good. I really appreciate the great rundown that you did on that. So, Aaron, what I need you to do is kind of contrast the establishment with the conservative position. So, what do the conservatives stand for, and how does this how do they differentiate themselves from the establishment?
Well, I think to get an understanding of how the whole divide started, you could trace all the way back to like 1912 when Teddy Roosevelt challenged William Taft, who was his successor, for the presidency, because William Taft didn't really continue upon Teddy Roosevelt's progressive legacy. Not that Taft was all that conservative, but he was just more so than Teddy Roosevelt. So Teddy Roosevelt went third party. He started the Bull Moose Party, which in essence was a progressive party. And he ran as a third-party candidate in the general election between him, William Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. And doing so, Roosevelt handed the presidency to Woodrow Wilson, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of the Republic right there. But ever since then, you've seen this divide in the Republican Party between the more conservative side and the more establishment progressive side. And unfortunately, the establishment side has been winning for the most part because they're the ones that have held on to power. They're the ones who essentially hold the power within the Republican Party and within Washington D.C. I think the best way to describe the establishment it is the donor class, as Harry said. But it's the donor class, it's the lobbyists, it's the people on K Street, the interest groups, and the politicians that they buy off, and then the media that that has an incestuous relationship with them. And I think you can. I think the thing is that people kind of like to describe the difference between establishment and conservative as it's like, oh, we agree on most things, we just agree on the tactics. No, it's not tactics at all. I mean, it's because people in the establishment actually don't believe in values of limited government and so forth. They just believe they can run bigger government better than the Democrats can. And I think my evidence of that is just look at George W. Bush's presidency. I mean, we had the House and the Senate for 6 years under a Republican president, and government grew more so than it was rolled back. I mean, we had No Child Left Behind, we had Medicare Part D, an expansion of an entitlement. They created a whole new Department of Homeland Security. The debt increased by $5 trillion under George W. Bush's watch. You see going down the line, I mean, government grew under George W. Bush. And so that's why there's such hostility by the establishment towards conservatives, because the establishment does not believe in conservative values. They just like to use the base like a pawn to try and hold on to power. And I think the conservative side has had enough of it, because time and again, the establishment doesn't fight on our behalf against Democrats in Washington, D.C. You think about, like, people always moan about gridlock in D.C. It's like, oh, nothing gets done. But it's like, believe me, I wish there was gridlock in Washington, because that would mean that the Republicans are actively trying to stop and fight against Obama, but they're not. You think about it, it's like he's got almost everything he's wanted. I mean, he got Obamacare. He got Dodd-Frank. They're not doing anything to fight any of those. In fact, the one time they fought against Obamacare was when Cruz led the movement to defund Obamacare, and the establishment fought him every step of the way. And had they been on his side, maybe we would have gotten a significant victory out of that. But we didn't, because the establishment was more focused on cheering Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and so forth than actually fighting the Democrats. You know that the establishment Republicans have also funded Obama's executive amnesty. They funded Planned Parenthood. They won't fight against sanctuary cities, and they favor amnesty. And that's really where the donor class comes in, because donor class and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they want their cheap foreign labor, and that's why the Republicans are so all in for amnesty, which is what made Marco Rubio's betrayal on the issue so disappointing, and why the Gang of Eight has been a scarlet letter on Rubio's forehead, for the past few years, and why his candidacy never went anywhere. And I would disagree with Harry on when he said that most Republicans are pro-life. I don't think they are. I think Russia has played a story from like '91, I think, where he was at some sort of dinner party in New York or D.C. or wherever, and this establishment donor or someone in the establishment came up to him, was like angrily yelling at him, pointing his finger at Russia, being like, how dare you try and grow these pro-life values? We've got to get these pro-life out of the party, so forth. These people, they're not pro-life because they're embarrassed by conservatives. They're embarrassed by social conservatism, especially because they hold the Democrats' view of us that we're a bunch of, Bible-preaching thumper hicks, from the South, which is gross, and that's why they don't fight. That's why they don't fight to defund Planned Parenthood. That's why they don't really fight to overturn Roe v. Wade and kind of run away and avoid the abortion issue, as well as the gay marriage issue and religious liberty issues and so forth. And so that's what the divide is. It's that conservatives actually believe in the values of limited government and individual liberty, and the establishment doesn't. They want to hold on to power, and that's what the divide came. And that's really what the divide is all about, and why it's important that we beat the establishment, but not beat them with Donald Trump, but beat them with Ted Cruz.
Yeah, I have to make. I'm becoming a centrist here, and I'm going to say that I think that establishment Republicans, they may say that they're pro-life, but I don't think that they're actively pro-abortion necessarily. I think that they just don't see it as an important issue or an issue that they actually want to defend one way or the other. They just want it out. So I'm taking the middle ground. I'm reaching across the aisle here. So you should be proud of me. There you have it.
Right.
All right, so the Trumpster position, and I hope you guys can still hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. The Trumpster position is what Amanda was going to talk about, but I'm going to try and do a little bit myself. They obviously kind of were part of the conservative movement at the beginning because we couldn't tell the difference between actual anti-establishment and establishment. In the way I saw it was just that. There were only two. You were either part of the establishment or you were part of the anti-establishment. And then when Trump came along, he started out, standing for the anti-establishment. It was really exciting to see him slap Jeb Bush in the face so many times and to stick it to the media and say, oh yeah, I hate the media too, just like you, and I just like you guys. And then now he, instead of just being that, we find out that he has all these non-conservative positions. So the Trumpster position now has turned into the third, essentially, this triple divide, I guess. Immigration, but Trump has 5 different positions on immigration and on any issue at any given time. So, but generally speaking, it's a tough stance on immigration. It's very anti-PC. The supporters seem to be looking for a strong man to fight for them, to stand up for the white working class that feel that globalization has taken away their jobs and they want their jobs back. So basically they want a government handout. They say not for limited government, they're for government that benefits them, kind of like the establishment. So that's my little spiel on the Trumpsters, and if you guys wanted to weigh in on that, that would be fantastic.
I think the best way to think about it is basically the Trumpsters are kind of more the nationalist, kind of populist, progressive movement, and that can be traced back to like the 1880s when the populist movement had a little bit of a populist uprising in the United States, and that was when the whole People's Party came out, and most of the stuff they advocated for was progressivism. So it was like progressive taxation, higher tariffs, direct democracy, repealing the 17th Amendment. It would basically pave the way for the progressives to basically infiltrate, the American fabric and way of life. I think the best way to think of Trump's resign is not necessarily establishment or conservative. It's more, think about it as more like the Ross Perot, Pat Buchanan wing of the Republican Party. In other words, like the people who are nationalists in that, they may preach, more stricter immigration laws, but they're also very protectionist economically. That's why, they cheer on Trump with these, by putting in like these 45% tariffs on China and so forth, which would be disastrous since you already have 12,000 tariffs in the country already. That means higher prices on consumer goods. Tariffs are really a tax on the consumer, and only basically harms the very people that they claim to help, because American consumers face higher prices, and nobody likes higher prices, really. It's basically just sort of like, it's kind of like it's a populist uprising, and it's not the kind of thing that would necessarily roll back government at all. It'd just be them running the government and probably expanding it. I think Trump has a lot of authoritarian tendencies, as evident by the fact that he wants to expand libel laws, and seems open to using executive orders. And is open to universal health care and so forth. So I think the best way to view it then is, it's nationalism and populism. That's something that we as conservatives should be actively fighting against.
Okay, so I just have a couple comments I kind of wanted to make. I guess there's sort of a subgroup of the Trump supporters who kind of like to call themselves the alternative right, or I guess
the alt-right,
the alt-right as it's known. And so this is, I think, it's a bit of an interesting movement, because it's not, I think it's a movement that doesn't have any kind of defining kind of figurehead. There's no, I guess, there's Milo Yiannopoulos, who he's not an alt-right figure, but he's someone who, he likes to assure everyone that the alt-right isn't just a bunch of like racists on Twitter who just tweet Ben Shapiro with like anti-Semitic memes. And but besides, I guess, Milo, who likes to for some reason defend them, I haven't seen any actual kind of large figures who represent themselves as leaders of the movement. So, and I think in a way, I think I guess this would annoy the alt-right more than anything. You can kind of compare them to feminism, in a sense. Like there's no defining kind of creed that the group has. Like you have no idea what they really stand for, besides, I guess, what all the collective members of the group kind of like to say, right? Because there's no, for example, with conservatives, you have the Constitution. This is what we believe. We believe in limited government, individual freedom, etc. With the alt-right, this doesn't exist, right? There's no defined set of values that the group has. So it's really just defined by what its followers say, right? Basically, like feminism, and it's defined by the loudest voices, right? And as far as I know, as far as their internet kind of presence goes, there's a website called, I think it's the Stormtrooper or something. Is that what it was called?
Stormfront?
Stormfront, yeah. And this website is like, I spent a few minutes on it, and if I was going to make like a parody account for, if it was going to be like an Eric Carton blog, this is essentially what it would be. It's like a tirade of just anti-Semitic rants.
But it's a neo-Nazi website, basically, right?
Yeah, it's beyond parody. It's just neonazi.com is basically where you're at. And so these are some fairly. I haven't heard about the alt-right a lot, but there's just a large kind of online community that follows Trump, and they tweet Trump, and they push specific ideas, and basically all these people, a lot of them, they call themselves, I guess, free speech advocates, and then I guess the second thing would be they call themselves like nationalists or whatever, and it's like so it's kind of this large movement that really doesn't, I don't think they even know what they stand for. Essentially what they kind of want is I suppose they do want to stop illegal immigration and close the border, which they sort of have in common with conservatives. But I mean, outside of that, I don't know what exactly it is that these people want, really.
Well, I don't think they're as large as we think they are, but I think the alt-right basically it's white supremacist, neo-Nazi nationalists. So nationalism, I think, you hear that term a lot, but basically nationalism is just kind of whatever you want it to mean. Basically, it's not really a coherent, it's not really a coherent philosophy like conservatism is. It's just whatever you want it to be. And I think the alt-right basically is sort of like they're very much against political correctness, which, okay, that's good against political correctness, but the problem is that they take it a step too far because they then, advocate, like racist, anti-Semitic BS stuff, and that's too far because that's what becomes vulgar, over the top. This isn't too much to help our cause. It really harms it, and that's not something we should be in favor of. And so, but I don't think that. The alt-right is really as big as people think it is, because as I wrote about yesterday, I mean, it seems like Trump has like this phony Twitter army that basically consists of these bots that he pays off to create. And I think best proof of this is when I tweeted out the story yesterday, within seconds I got like an avalanche of all these pro-Trump bots like tweeting at me, like screaming, I'm really stupid cock," or all kinds of like really nasty things being tweeted at me. And most of the Twitter accounts were accounts that have been created in the last month or two, and their first tweets were like, retweeting Trump or something. So it's like these idiot bots basically proved my story right. So a lot of what Trump has is an illusion, because he likes to make you think that he has these big crowds, that he has this big internet following, when really they're just, many people have reported that on his campaign launch, many of those attendees were attendees that were paid and bought for by the Trump campaign to appear. And now it seems like, on Twitter, a lot of his his ardent Twitter supporters are basically paid bots. And that's what Trump does. I mean, like, a lot of what he does is an illusion. He wants to try and lie to people. And it's been said in his podcast on Monday, I think Trump supporters like being lied to. He has been using the analogy, it's like meth addicted biker, that girl dates because the meth addicted biker fights everybody else and lies to everybody else, but it doesn't lie to her supposedly. But the truth is that if he's lying and fighting other people, he's gonna do the same thing to you. And he says that normally it's like we wouldn't care if it wasn't someone that was close to us. But it's like but we would care if it was like our sister was dating, a meth addicted biker. And so, but the analogy then is that the Republican Party is basically dating the meth addicted biker, which is Trump, and is misrepresenting everything that we conservatives have stood for. And that's a problem, and we shouldn't let the alt-right try and take over our movement. We have to basically just try and beat them back, and show that it's like nationalism and populism is not what we're about. We're about limited government. We're about individual liberty, and judging people by by what's between their ears rather than the color of their skin or their genitalia and so forth.
Yeah, I appreciate that you brought up the idea that Trump's Twitter following and Facebook following and social media following in general is not as large as everybody thinks, because it's the same with Obama and Hillary.
Oh, yeah.
I think the statistics were like they've got 70% of their followers are I mean, I'm the queen of faking followers and faking Twitter sites. So it's not hard. I think Rush has talked about there's various algorithms that are pretty simple. Make it look like you've got an army of thousands on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt. I'm sure that there are nasty people making up these memes and sending them out on bots, but it's not as many as people might think. And it rubs me the wrong way when Milo kind of tries to defend these people, because it's really just disgusting stuff they're doing. So, I know, I'm disagreeing with Milo. What's wrong with me? It's disgusting. Okay, so I wanted to kind of talk about what the result... Did you have a question? I'm losing the audio.
No, I was going to say, doesn't it bother you how Milo...
Terrible
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
No, it's to say, it's like, doesn't it bother you that Milo
it's
refers
cutting in and out. Yeah, but that's partly just because Milo's really weird. There's a couple of different things that bother me about him, quite frankly. But I overlook those because I'm a fangirl and I have to overlook some things. But so what I wanted to talk about for this kind of second half is what would be the result of each if the establishment got their nominee, which in all likelihood, right up Paul Ryan, Sal, finagle cases, whoever they're going to get. If they get their nominee, what is the result of that election? Does this not I don't want Harry to answer.
Sorry, it was a bit choppy. So who do you think?
So I think what you asked was what would be the results if the establishment got their nominee, right?
Yeah. So I mean, do you?
It would be disaster. It would be disaster because the only way they can get the nominee at this point is if basically shove someone like Paul Ryan or Mitt Romney or Jeb or whomever down our throats at a contested convention, a broker convention, I should say. And I think that would basically reinforce all the anger at the establishment that the base has had towards them this election cycle. And I don't think people would show up and vote. I don't. Yeah, especially with someone like Paul Ryan, who's a very open borders guy, basically. I mean, maybe if they nominated Scott Walker, then maybe that'd be a little more acceptable to conservatives. But I just think that unless it's someone who unless it's either Donald Trump or Ted Cruz, then the base won't turn out, and then they won't turn out anyway for Trump. So really, the only real option then is Ted Cruz. And at first, when this process first started, I was really scared of a contested convention because I thought that the establishment, wouldn't let Ted Cruz be nominated at all. And there's no question that they probably are going to try that. Should it come to a contested convention, I'm thinking it probably will, the way things are going. But the thing is that Ted Cruz behind the scenes has run a fantastic ground game and delegate operation. Most of these delegates at state conventions, he's winning to his side. He's getting a lot of his loyal supporters elected towards the Rules Committee. So, okay, as a preface this, there's a rule called Rule 40B, which says that in order to be on the ballot at a convention, you have to have won the majority of delegates in 8 states. And originally that rule was passed in 2012 because there was a bit of a Ron Paul uprising going on at the 2012 convention, and so the RNC tried to stop it by passing Rule 40B as a way to preserve Mitt Romney's nomination. Now the funny thing is that rule is not coming back to bite them with this election because obviously under the current rule only Trump and Cruz would be on the ballot towards the convention. And so they're going to try, and a week before the convention happens in July, the Rules Committee meets, and in theory they could change this rule so anybody could be on the ballot. And normally how it works is you have a committee of 112 people who were selected to the Rules Committee through the states and so forth. The states basically appoint certain delegates to the Rules Committee. And so, and typically, the RNC chair will ask the Rules Committee to change a particular rule or add a rule, and they follow on like loyal supporters. But with the rule like Rule 40B, if Reince Priebus wants to get rid of it, and he said on the record he doesn't want to, but you can't really trust what Reince Priebus says because he's a weasel and should be fired, I think. But should he request that rule be changed? He could run into some problems with that just because a lot of the people in the Rules Committee are becoming Cruz and Trump supporters and mostly Cruz because he's the one working behind the scenes to make sure he gets his people as delegates and on the Rules Committee. So hopefully they will prevent that rule from being changed. And even if that rule is changed, then Cruz has done such a good job getting his loyalists as delegates. Then they would naturally go to him on the second ballot. So that's why I'm actually becoming more confident that we will go to a contested convention. and that Cruz will be the nominee on the second or third ballot or so. But the establishment will try and ram their candidate down our throat, so it's something we all have to be wary of.
And so I guess the other side of that is what happens, I guess.
So Harry, why don't you talk about what the result? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't hear anything you just said there.
You want to talk about it?
Did you say, what were the results?
Oh, I was going to have you talk about what the result of the Trump nomination would be.
Trump nomination, okay. So I think, personally, I think the Trump nomination would be a lot better than the alternative where the establishment, you know, repeals the rule that I ever mentioned, and then they put, you know, Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan, whatever. Because if ultimately Trump wins, according to every current poll, you know, all the favorability ratings, he's going to get demolished, basically in all 50 states. And you know, ultimately, what happens is we lose the election, and in 4 years we pick up the pieces, and you know, we go at it again. I think if that doesn't happen, if the establishment does what, you know, if they repeal the rule and put Paul Ryan in place, I think that would really hurt the party a lot more, in a sense that it would essentially, the base would they wouldn't, no one would come out to vote. And I have no idea how the party would kind of pick up from that, right? Versus if Trump's the nominee, I mean, it'll be an interesting election. There will be no shortage of mudslinging going both ways. He'll have all the media coverage, right? And I mean, again, according to the polls, there's no way he can win the election, right? But we'll see what happens, I suppose, right? And I mean, worst case, he loses, and then in 4 years we have to recover. I think that's how I see it.
I don't think country has 4 years. I mean, we're already on the brink of losing the country anyway. You know, and 4 more years of Hillary, I don't think we can recover. And the thing is, it's like, I think they're both equally disastrous. The Trump nominee and the establishment nominee at a convention are both equally disastrous. The thing about a Trump nomination is that Trump would probably lose the House and the Senate. And then basically be Obama's, you know, first 2 years all over again. I don't know if that would happen with an establishment nominee. And I think, but I mean, again, both scenarios are terrible, and we're going to get shellacked either way. I think in the establishment case, maybe we have a chance to hold on to the House and the Senate. I'm not totally sure. But regardless, I mean, again, the only way out of this is to get Cruz nominated. You know, most likely at a contested convention. That's really our only option at this point. And again, I'm confident that he can prevail. But it's going to get ugly between now and then. So we have to basically sort of, it's like Mark Levin likes to say that we're in this vice right now. We're on the one side we have the Buchanan, Perot, progressive populist wing on one side, and the establishment wing on the other. And those of us who are conservatives are kind of stuck in the middle, you know, in this vice between the two. We have to basically between now and then we have to break out of it. And hopefully we will. If not, then we lose the country, and that's not desirable at all.
So basically, I think we're all pretty much agreed that either a Trump nominee or an establishment nominee basically loses against Hillary.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think still a Cruz nominee is no guarantee for a win either, right? It's going to be a tough election anyway, but definitely I think Cruz has a better shot according to basically every single poll that exists, except for Drudge.
Well, yeah, but the Drudge polls are just by Trump spam bots, you know. So.
I'm losing the audio. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. A little choppy.
Okay. I'm back. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I'm very sorry. It's terrible today. The weather's bad and it messes everything up. So if anybody is watching live, you guys can tweet us questions at WarriorWoman91 because that's the only thing that I check. And what other questions do I have? So, what do you think if Trump was the president? In Ben's worst nightmare, if Trump is president, you can take this or you will take it.
Sorry, what? It was just really
I
choppy.
didn't catch the question, but
What happens if Trump is the president? What is the outlook?
Oh,
does anybody really know? I mean, it's hard to know what Trump really believes. I just think that it would kind of be like a right-wing version of Obama. Like I said, he has authoritarian tendencies. He wants to expand libel laws and sue more journalists and stuff, which is kind of scary for all of us who are kind of in that field. I mean, he sues a lot, or he doesn't get his way. And his campaign is shown to be very sluggish and act like bullies. People lose them. You know, it's shown by Corey Lewandowski committing battery against Michelle Fields. And then you have Roger Stone out there, finding fake stories in the National Enquirer. He wrote the smear piece against Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, and Eric Erickson in the Daily Caller opinion section. I mean, so that it implies that President Trump would basically be, you know, like a thug in many respects for people who disagree with him, whether that's expanding libel laws or using executive orders like Obama does, and so forth. And it's kind of a little scary to think about, just only the fact that we don't know what exactly he'll do beyond trying to empower himself, really. Especially since he's really not well versed on the issues and is not really interested in becoming well versed in the issues either. He just has his few 30-second soundbite talking points and that's it. So, I mean, it's hard to really predict what Trump presidency will look like, and ultimately it's an exercise in futility because President Trump will never happen. But it probably won't be all that great.
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's really hard to predict what would happen. Like right now, he says he wants to pass immigration reform, which involves, you know, building the border, building a wall across the border, deporting illegal immigrants. Right? If he were to actually win the nomination to become the president of the United States, you know, would he actually do that? Is really tough to say. And I think the general election would even change. Right? I think based his policies now versus if he wins the nomination, what his policies would be like next October, next September. I think even those would be a lot different. So, you know, right now, you know, predicting what he would do as president, that's really difficult to say. I mean, like he recently he said how he's going to get Mexico to pay for the wall, which I think was kind of interesting. I mean, in a sense, basically he says he's going to essentially collapse their economy, right? Because their economy is obviously drastically dependent on the American economy. So he certainly has the power to basically say, you know, you're going to pay for this whatever billion-dollar wall, or we're going to basically financially destroy your country. And I mean, would he actually kind of double down on that in a general election? I mean, I have no idea. Right? It's just really hard to predict anything with this guy.
And I think you remember there's that New York Times interview that they had about immigration that was late to BuzzFeed that apparently
So, go ahead.
he apparently he's a lot more weaker on it than he says. And you know, New York Times won't release the audio, and then Donald Trump's like, well, I'm not going to release it because I respect the process of off the record. That's not how off the record works. Off the record just means that the source asked, you know, to not publish his comments, and the journalists agree to it. So anytime Trump could say, I want these published, and it would be perfectly okay to do so. I think as your election, New York Times would probably release those comments, and people would see that Trump doesn't do what he says on immigration. I think he's hinted at that too, because he says a lot that, like, he notices that the crowd's being bored. Then he just says, you know, we're going to build a wall and makes him pay for it just to, you know, make the crowd go crazy. And I think in this election, we've already seen him flip on H-1B visas. On his website, it says that he's going to basically put a moratorium on expanding H-1B visas. And then during the debate, he says, well, you know, I've changed. I feel like, you know, we should have put a moratorium on H-1B visas. And then he flipped again on that, like, the next day or something like that. So I don't think it really does mean what he says on on immigration. That's probably what that New York Times audio reveals. And if that comes out in the general election, it'll demoralize the base, and it will plant seedlings into the heads of the undecided voters. That's like, how can we trust this guy, given that he keeps changing his views, and says one thing but believes another deep down. And again, that's one of the main reasons why he's gonna get shellacked in a general election against Hillary, who's really an awful candidate. It's like, we should be losing to her, but we're gonna nominate, the one guy who possibly can't, who will lose to her.
Mm-hmm. So do you guys think that Trump is kind of destroying the conservative movement, or do you think that the conservative movement can recover from this?
I don't think he's destroying it. I think he's certainly doing it some harm, because his pro-life, his abortion comments especially, were damaging to the pro-life movement. Because we've been on offense, the pro-life movement, for the past few years now. Now that more than half the country agrees with us, and we've been on offense ever since the Kermit Gosnell butchery came to light. But now with Trump's abortion comments, saying that we should punish the woman too, it's like, that's never been the pro-life position. That's how every pro-life leader condemned his comments, well, the fact is that now the left can use that soundbite and say, see, these pro-lifers really hate women and so forth. It's a war on women, and that's certainly very damaging. Overall, I don't think Trump is necessarily damaging the conservative movement. It's certainly a setback, but not something we can't recover from. As conservatives, at least. Again, whether the country can recover from it, that's another matter altogether, because I don't think it can survive, of 4 years of Hillary, which basically the 4 years of Obama. So, but certainly I think conservatives can pick up the pieces if Trump is the nominee and loses a general election. But we need to get more. What I keep saying is that we need to unite behind a candidate early. And that's why I've been insisting that Rush, Levin, all these guys, they need to get behind someone like Ted Cruz from the very beginning. Because, I mean, the big reason why Trump has as big a lead as he has so far is because the field's been divided. And most conservatives were fighting between Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio rather than focusing on Donald Trump. And so, and notice it wasn't Rubio dropped out when Cruz started surging. And again, I'm becoming more confident that this will work out in my favor. But if it doesn't, it's going to be because we didn't unite early. And certainly in the next election cycle, if God forbid Hillary's the president, then we have to unite early and learn to kind of iron our differences and really get behind a true solid conservative and not be at each other's throats so much.
Yeah, I think I agree in a sense. It's not a Trump candidacy wouldn't really destroy the movement itself, right? Because I think the movement the conservative movement knows what it's fighting for. It has a set of defined values, like it has the Constitution, it has the idea of limited government and all that. So it's not distorted in any way by a Trump candidacy. I think any more than it was. I suppose the only thing it would do is perhaps kind of give the left more firepower in the sense that they could point to Trump and say, "Oh, look, conservatives are racist" or whatever. But I mean, in a sense, like. If he's the nominee and he loses, right, we still, at the end of the day, the movement itself still knows what it's fighting for, and it's essentially the same fight it's always been. But it's not particularly good for the country, right? If you add the fact, with the passing of Justice Scalia, and so the potential damage that could come from a Hillary presidency is a lot greater than it was like 4 years ago when Obama won. So I think like the next 4 years could be a lot worse than the last 4 years. Essentially, is what it really comes down to. But the movement itself will go on. I guess the question is what.
Okay, I lost audio. Can you guys still?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay. We just got a really bad delay. Okay, so that's the first one I had for you guys today. I want to give a shout out to Hamish Khan. We got Ben Shapiro to follow him. I'm so proud of you, Hamish Khan. It was a lot of hard work, and I'm really happy for you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And also a shout out to at Ben Shapiro and at Real Daily Wire, because I have no idea who.
Yeah, who runs that account again?
Okay, if you guys want to give me shout outs, go right ahead.
Well, I think a shout out deserves to go out to to Eric Erickson and Patrick Ruffini for and Derek Hunter, the Daily Caller, for exposing the fake Twitter Trump army. Basically made my research for that a lot easier. And it's really an important story. I think it's really a big one going forward. So they deserve the credit. And as always, shout out to Proud Texan because he's like one of the most hilarious people on Twitter, with the best gifs and so forth. So that's at Become a Texan. Everyone follow him because he's a really funny dude.
Cool. You can follow me if you don't already.
I love you at Proud Texan.
No, I'm not Proud Texan. I'm at Harry1T6. You can follow me there. Let's see, and then I guess you can follow the other website that I write for. You can at BizVest. If you don't follow that website, you can follow that. And then I guess see what you can then shout out to I guess Rebel Media. I also write for those guys, so you can follow at Rebel TV. Okay, and CIJ News. There's another interesting website, so you can go at CIJ News. You can follow those guys. And yeah, those are my shout-outs. Oh, I think she's gone.
We just lost her. Okay.
Is she coming back or?
I mean, okay. She's back. Okay.
Are we still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. I got kicked off. All right. Oh, we have this here. Oh, what's this? And a fork, too! This is for you, Hamish Khan.
No, I'm Kelly.
This is for
you. I'm going to use the fork to use the pizza.
This is for Hamish Khan. There. I'm not going to use a fork, though, because I'm not weird. Okay. So I really appreciate it. I love you, Hamish Khan. I don't know if you're a guy or a girl, so it might be weird, but there's that piece of pizza and a fork just for you. So, and I also want to make sure that everybody realizes that everything that Harry says is absolutely true because he's 6'2". So you all have to agree with everything that he says.
Yeah.
Anything that Aaron and I say is just worthless because we're under 5'6". So.
Yeah, exactly. We're so small, Kenny. One of the Trump bots called me the littlest cuck, so I guess my nickname now, I'm the littlest cuck officially, so I guess everything I say is very cucktastic, so,
yeah. I'm shorter than
all my cucktastic opinions.
Yes. All right. All right, so I think we're done, so I hope Amanda appreciated that. I told Amanda that I was going to do that. Because she was going to miss out. So I hope you enjoyed that, Amanda. All right, so we will see you guys later, and I thank you everybody who tuned in, and we are going off the air.